Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about the astrology of October 2025. I want to actually start with a little bit about mundane astrology. So mundane astrology is the practice of looking at what's going on in the world and how that is being reflected in the transits that we're experiencing, or rather the other way around. So in the world, there are lots of different things happening right now that are very, very reflective of what's going on as far as the planets are concerned. One lovely little example, a couple of months ago now, so this was around the sort of middle of August, there was a grand sextile in play. I spoke about it in my Patreon. I mentioned it very briefly here on YouTube. I'll post a picture of the chart actually in my posts section here on YouTube so that you can see the pattern that was created. And I talked about how this pattern, the grand sextile, can be connected to bees because bees create their honeycomb in this hexagonal pattern. And just a few days after this pattern started to dissipate, there was this big news about how science has created a superfood for bees. I'm not quite sure what I think about that. It concerns me that we even have to do that. But it really interested me that there was this reflection of as above, so below. And I'm very interested in these kinds of stories because all of them give us a sense of how things are going to unfold. Now, of course, one of our biggest stories at the moment is Pluto in Aquarius, because where Pluto moves, everything transforms, everything changes. And we are moving into, or already have moved into, this age of air when we had the grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius a few years ago. We had the beginnings then that there are going to be big changes in society, and now Pluto is beginning that transformative process that is going to change our future. It is connecting with Uranus and Gemini, so both of these, of course, air signs, all to do with communication and the mind, connections and technology. And these big planets making these big connections tell us that everything is changing. We are in for a radical upgrade, Uranus in Gemini, of how we communicate, how things connect. And because it's Uranus, it's likely to be quirky and different and kind of alien. And this is one of the reasons why we've been talking, or some of us have been talking about, this is an ET phone home kind of scenario with Uranus in Gemini. We have alien communications, possibly. But the alien communication can also be something that is homegrown as well. I actually just watched a video on YouTube. I'll put the link below. By Eric Floyd is the actor who presents the video. The channel is called AI in Context, and the title of the video is "We Are Not Ready for Super Intelligence." It caught my eye. And there was this fantastic quote that I picked out, and two quotes actually. So one of the quotes was from right at the end of the video without any spoilers. So he says, AGI is not just about tech, it's also about geopolitics. It's about your job, it's about power. It's about who gets to control the future. Wow, what a Pluto in Aquarius quote that is. And then just a little bit of a longer quote here. It says, AI 2027 depicts a possible future where artificial intelligence radically transforms the world in just a few intense years. It's based on detailed expert forecasts. But how much of it will actually happen? Are we really racing towards a choice between a planet controlled by the elite or one where humans have lost control entirely? My takeaway: loss of control, racing scenarios, and concentration of power are all alarmingly plausible. So we'll try and just dial down the heat a little bit on that, because obviously these are kind of scary times, scary scenarios, and Pluto does intensify our fears. Don't forget, Pluto is now out of bounds. So Pluto is working in very radical and different ways. It's going to be in and out of bounds up until 2035. I wrote a really long article over on my Substack. So there's a big article that has all of those details. And so this whole video was talking about the two different scenarios. That really caught my attention because Uranus is in Gemini, a sign that's associated with the twins, which typically we think of as two possible paths. Now, I'm sure there's, as the video says, there's probably going to be other things coming in, other things happen, things that we didn't expect, which is very, very Uranus in Gemini. So of course, any prediction of the future, there's always going to be a little bit of leeway needed. But one of the things that caught my attention, just going back to this alien language, is that once AI has kind of gone past artificial general intelligence, where it is as clever as we are, it kind of starts to develop its own language. And as it becomes more and more clever, it becomes more and more unintelligible to us as humans. And that, of course, sounds alien. So having heard that, it's something I hadn't really thought about myself. It's like I only have a very sparse knowledge of anything to do with AI. But this has firstly informed me, this video has informed me of things that I hadn't sort of thought before, but it's also helped me to kind of connect it to the astrology at play, making it even clearer that these scenarios are very possible with the astrology at play. However, I think it's also important that we don't just feel like, with Uranus and Gemini, that the world is in the hands, Gemini is associated with the hands, in the hands of the machines, Uranus, or just the hands of the powerful Uranus trying to Pluto over there in Aquarius. One of the big issues is who has the power with this scenario. So I think from the astrology point of view, it's reminding us all that we do have individual power. So this is Pluto and Aquarius, power to the people, that we have the ability to ask for something different, to press our governments or people in power to ensure that there is some kind of transparency in this process. But the process is in process. We are moving towards this future where all these very big questions about technology are going to be there, whether or not we like it. And I think that's the point too with the astrology at play, with it moving into the age of air. We are moving into this age of technology. How we do it and what we do with it, of course, is going to be dependent on our development as the human race and how evolved, how awake, how compassionate, how connected we truly are. Maybe this is exactly why then we need to have this big conversation, Gemini. We need to have this big conversation about how we can change, upgrade, and develop the way that we connect and communicate with one another so that we're not so divided, so that we truly have the power in our hands. So I wanted to start with that because I think it is important to keep relating the astrology back to what's actually happening on our planet, because, this is not just happening in isolation. It's not just a cerebral exercise. Astrology is something to be applied to our living life, our actual lives, whether we do it for our own chart, our own self, or whether we do mundane astrology. And of course, we are all part of mundane astrology because we are all part of the collective. So moving on, talking about the astrology for the month ahead. So one of the big things that's going on this month is that we're getting a reiteration of that big story that's been kind of floating around all year as Neptune moves back from 0 Aries. So as we come into the month, Neptune will be on 0 Aries, and then it's going to go back on to 29 Pisces. So I'm going to talk more about that as we come to it, but I just wanted to flag it up straight away because that immediately says that we're being tuned in to the fact that there's a really, really big story beginning. A whole new world is being dreamed into view with Neptune. Of course, Saturn is going to be part of that as well with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction next year. But we've got this big dream coming into play, whether it's the dreams of all of us or whether it's just the dreams of some of us. That's a big question. But the big dream is there, but we've got to kind of go back and look at maybe what we're sacrificing, because that's also part of the process, isn't it? When we go through a big change, naturally other things fall away. So I think that's going to be part of the story with Neptune going back into Pisces. So we've got the emphasis on these two really, really important degrees, the beginning of the zodiac and the end of the zodiac. The second half of the month is also marked by two really big patterns. One is slightly wobbly. So we're going to have Jupiter square to Chiron, and there's going to be a sort of out of sign opposition to Pluto, but it is there. We are going to see this tension coming into play with a grand square as Jupiter opposes Pluto, squares Chiron, and also we're going to have the Sun sort of playing into that pattern as well. As a balance to that, we're going to have a grand trine in play as well. So this will be Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So we're going to have these big patterns in play where we have all of this tension going on. And yet if we center ourselves, maybe we can tap into this cosmic flow. So that's going to be really interesting. Again, we'll cover a bit more as we get to it. So the beginning of the month, the 1st of October, is marked by Juno finally entering Sagittarius. I just wanted to flag it up because Juno actually started this transit back in February 2025 and then very quickly stationed retrograde and went back into Scorpio and has been spending all year in Scorpio. So we really get a sort of change of scene now. Juno is associated with marriage. She's often called the marriage asteroid. So absolutely, she can be associated with the partner that you have, long-term partner that you have. But she's also about sort of contracts and agreements and commitment. And that's how I tend to see her in practice. So she can be the character associated with where you sign on the dotted line for something, doesn't matter what it is, or it's a verbal agreement of some kind. Now, the commitment and the agreements and the marriage is associated now with Sagittarius themes. So for us to be together, for us to commit, for us to come to agreement, we kind of need to be on the same page as one another, says Juno in Sagittarius. We need to believe that we're aiming for the same thing. We need to maybe have similar beliefs or at least be able to agree to disagree. We need to have a similar vision. We need to have an adventure together, says Sagittarius particularly. So there's almost like this feeling of after we have been doing some intense work on our shared resources and who has the power in the relationship, now we can start sort of considering other paths or other alternatives for life going forwards, or just considering the adventure. This is an adventure that we're on together. So we get this sense of things beginning to widen up as far as our commitments are concerned, and realizing maybe that we have more options than we thought of. And then Mercury goes into Scorpio. And so that's on the 6th of October. And so when Mercury goes into Scorpio, there is an intensification of how we're thinking and we can also maybe think more clearly about the changes that we want to make. We're inclined to think about stuff in a way that sort of acknowledges we've got fears and we've got shadows. It's very good for detective work. It's very good for research of all kinds, for having really deep and powerful conversations that actually move us along in some way. So whether it's a conversation with your spouse, or whether it's a conversation with your therapist, or even a conversation with yourself, there's a sense that when we connect the mind with what's going on in the sort of the unconscious or the subconscious, we start to realize, actually, maybe I need to change my language, or the language that I'm using is powerful. The way that I think can make me feel more powerful or disempowered. It's really interesting as well that just noting that every time we get an ingress into Scorpio, there's going to be a yod pattern. And this is because we've got that all these sextiles in play, with Pluto sextile to Neptune and Saturn, although that's out of sign at the moment. But Pluto sextile to Neptune, and then Uranus sextile to Neptune. So we've got all these big sextiles. So every time something goes into Virgo or into Scorpio, it creates a fleeting yod pattern. And yod patterns are kind of, the finger of God. Fate is pointing you in this direction. And so with Mercury, we're thinking deeply and vocalizing that there are these changes that we need. We want to communicate with absolute truth and transparency, and forge these intimate bonds with one another. But we're also feeling a little rattled by what's going on out in the world, whether we're losing our autonomy, Neptune in Aries, and whether we are making room for things to be different with Uranus in Gemini. So there's this sort of sense that we know we need to be thinking about and talking about these really big topics, but there's a feeling of discomfort at the same time. We will then have the full moon in Aries. This is going to be on the 7th of October. As usual, I will be doing a deep dive into this lunation over on my Patreon and also Substack, where you can also get a weekly forecast as well as the lunation readings. So the full moon in Aries, firstly, this is going to be a super moon, so we get that extra energetic boost. And it's in Aries, so we've already got the heat and the motion of Aries. We're now out of eclipse season, so we're kind of feeling like maybe I can do anything, remembering that Mars, the ruler of Aries, is actually in his other home sign over there in Scorpio. So there's a really strong undertone to this chart, and there's very few aspects. So it feels very pure Aries. There are some aspects, but it's generally very kind of isolated in a way. So there's a lot of activation that's coming in with this lunation that's really raising the question of how independent are we? How autonomous, I was talking about that before, how autonomous are we? How much do we have to compromise to do the things that we need to do? So this is all going to be highlighted by this lunation. We then have on the 13th of October, Venus moving into Libra. So Venus is, of course, the ruler of Libra, so she's strongly placed here. And so maybe this will try to help to smooth out any intensification that came up with the full moon, any conflicts that came up with the full moon. Venus in Libra is very much, let's just love one another, let's seek for peace and harmony, let's just sing together, let's shake hands and agree to disagree if necessary. Venus is always just trying to smooth things over, particularly in Libra, but there's a little bit too much tendency to do that because Venus will also oppose Neptune as she goes into Libra. So now we've got a scenario where maybe somebody or something is trying to smooth things over in a way that's very distracting, sort of promising everything and saying what you want to hear. We fall in love with love when Venus is opposite to Neptune. We fall in love with the ideal and not with the reality. So whether that's a person or a situation, we just need to be conscious that we're not being glamorized by something that's not really what it seems. On the 14th of October, Pluto will station direct. Again, remember when planets are stationing, they can be a little bit more wobbly. Their energy is a little more volatile. So we have Pluto stationing direct. And generally, that means that, okay, we've done that inner work that we needed to do. Now Pluto can get on with transforming, in this case for the collective, transforming our future, transforming society, transforming our politics, transforming the way we're using technology, transforming the way that we think and connect and communicate with one another. So Pluto's working on all that for the collective, but in our own lives, wherever Pluto is moving in our chart, the house that it's moving through, it's going to turn things around there as well. Very slowly, probably very subtly, unless you've got a really big transit going on with Pluto right now. If you have got a big movement with Pluto aspecting your chart somewhere, then it is likely that you'll sort of feel that station a little bit more. But remember, Pluto is transforming whichever part of life because it needs transforming. Pluto is trying to tell you that you have extra power here. You have more control than you think here. You have ways of changing this part of life that is going to empower you in the end. And so the movement is important. And don't forget, I do have all the videos with Pluto in Aquarius, the general introduction, and also Pluto in Aquarius for the signs. So there's horoscopes in there. I'll put the link below. So Pluto stations direct on the 14th of October. By the 16th of October, we're starting to move into this very kind of wobbly, but still there, grand square. So Jupiter is coming up to square Chiron, and Jupiter is now beginning to oppose Pluto. And then the sun is in Libra. So, of course, the sun is the light in this situation. So the spotlight is on diplomacy, we could say. And the spotlight is on how we are relating to one another. Don't forget, Venus is there now as well. So we've got all of this focus on our interpersonal relationships. But we've also got a story here about grappling for who has the most power, Jupiter opposite to Pluto. And there could also be power grabs kind of happening here, or land grabs actually with Jupiter in Cancer. So that is something we need to kind of be aware of, particularly with Ukraine and of course with Gaza as well. So with the sun opposite to Chiron, now we've got a situation where things are painful. We have to try to moderate our behavior and our ego with the sun so that we don't go around hurting one another. So that's one of the things that's sort of uppermost during this time. And for all of us, because we're getting this Jupiter-Pluto kind of dynamic coming in, for all of us, we can be looking at our own chart and sort of looking at where we might also feel this sense that we've got to grab land or grab power, in that sense of I've got to do something really big to take control of absolutely everything. We're going to revisit this theme as we move forwards again and again, because Jupiter is obviously moving forwards through Cancer, and then we'll move into Leo next year, where we'll get the perfection of Jupiter opposite to Pluto. So this is going to be a bit of an ongoing story, so we might as well start to get a handle on it now. Where's Jupiter traveling in your chart? Where's it heading to? Because next year that's going to be a bit more tension coming in. So the more you understand your feelings, Jupiter in Cancer, the more you understand your feelings, you understand where you belong, the sense of rootedness, the more you have faith in your intuition, the more you have good connections for your family, blood family, chosen family, whichever, the better that is, the less there's a sense, oh my God, everything's going out of control. I've got to do something, really, really big to kind of wrestle back the control in my life. So we want to dial down this kind of overwrought feeling, and also, Jupiter, big planet, Pluto, scary planet, scary god. We get this sort of idea, almost like a horror story. But horror stories are kind of magnified to make us feel scared. They create the music in a certain way, and they do the lighting in a certain way, and suddenly all your hairs are standing on end. So this is very kind of, Jupiter opposite to Pluto. It's like the manipulation of our senses, to feel like things are spinning out of control. So maybe we also need to watch this for stuff that's coming in, information that's coming into us that maybe we're perceiving in the wrong way because our fears are being played upon. I'm getting quite an intuitive hit about that as well. Like all my own little hairs on my arms are standing up there. So just to be conscious that sometimes our feelings are being manipulated. Now, moving forward, we also will have, that was the other one I wanted to mention, the grand trine that's going to be in play around the same time. So we can either get really freaked out and tense with that wibbly wobbly grand square, or we can start to really let these feelings flow, get in tune with these feelings. This is Mercury, Mars in Scorpio, trine Jupiter in Cancer, and Saturn in Pisces. And so we're going to have this in play from the 19th of October till around the 5th of November. So we've got a flow of feelings. When we trust our feelings, when we communicate bravely our deepest feelings, when we trust our instincts, when we fall back on old wisdom, cosmic wisdom, ancestral wisdom, when we lean into our faith, when we are compassionate and kind, then things start to flow, then energy flows in the right direction. On the 21st of October, we will have a new moon in Libra. Again, I will discuss that much more in depth, including asteroids, in my membership readings. However, just to note, important to note that this new moon in Libra is basically going to activate the pattern that I've just been talking about, because it's going to be square to Pluto. It's a dissociated square, but it's still square to Pluto, it's square to Jupiter, and it's also opposing Chiron as well as Aries. So definitely some sparks are flying, even though we are trying to make some kind of new start, some kind of new bond, a new partnership, a new relationship, a new connection. But it's got a lot of, I want to say dissent. It's got like a lot of dissent. It's got like a lot of challenges. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it just has some challenges to negotiate before we can maybe, get this thing off the ground, get this relationship or agreement off the ground. Right after that, on the 22nd of October, Neptune will re-enter Pisces. I can't stress how important this is, because Neptune is not going to get off that final degree of Pisces. It is going to sit on that 29 Pisces, the anaretic degree, the final degree of the entire zodiac, from the 22nd of October right up until when it enters Aries next year on the 26th of January. This is the last gasp of Neptune in Pisces. It's going to be acute. Okay, so we have October, November, December, January, 4 months of this acute energy in play. What does that mean in practice? It means that out there in the world, what might be reflected are the most Pisces things we can think about. So we might see extra conversation about our waters and, how clean they are, or whether they are heating up or not. Obviously, Neptune going into Aries, we're going to have more conversation about that going forwards. But sort of the trouble with waters, that's also Saturn in Pisces, the difficulties with waters, who controls the waters, all these kinds of things can come in. But we also have big conversations about, what is fake, what is real. Neptune in Pisces, unfortunately, brought us all the stuff with deflection and distraction. Tell them anything, tell them what they want to hear. We've had the rise of drugs. Ketamine is the big one over here in the UK. I think, other places have all got their favorites, but we've got a big rise in drug addiction and checking out, and it's more than alcohol, although of course alcohol is still there as well. But even just people sort of just checking out, generally watching too much TV, sleeping more. We could even say with the rise of spirituality, there has been, of course, the tendency to sort of spiritually whitewash things and kind of bypass stuff that we don't really like, and it's all peace and love. Yeah, I talk about love and light and how powerful it can be, but I absolutely think we need to have our feet on the ground. I am a 0 Taurus. My son is 0 Taurus. We have to have our feet on the ground and play a part in creating the world that we would like to see, to just be as good a human as you possibly can be for yourself, without sort of thinking, oh my God, I've got to save the entire world. And that's kind of Neptune in Pisces energy. Sometimes we do feel we've got to sacrifice everything. And yes, some sacrifices are necessary sometimes. Sometimes we do need to surrender to the flow of life. And that might be, wherever Neptune is moving in our own charts, we have to maybe give something up that is going to benefit us going forwards. Maybe we need to set some good boundaries, especially with Saturn. Maybe it's simply that, God is, or goddess, deity, whatever you want to call it, is kind of shouting really, really loudly. We have big, big dreams. We have big possibilities, big imagination. There's all this wonderful pool of the collective unconscious. As I'm speaking, I'm suddenly being shown the dream that I had, actually, I think it was last year now, where I was speaking with the fae, the fairy folk, and they were saying, we are helping. And that really touched me. I remember when I woke up, I was really quite emotional, because it really felt like, something was saying to us, we're doing our best to help you, but are you listening? And it feels like now, as they put that back into my thoughts, perhaps that's the same kind of situation that they're telling us. It's almost like the whisper is so loud, but we've got to be in the right place, the right frequency to hear that comfort, to hear that forgiveness, to hear that peace that's kind of drilling through everything. Neptune going back into Pisces can be, everything's fake, everything's just rubbish. I just want to kind of escape from all of this. Or it can be something truly transcendent. So what's the meaning that you're making of the world? Basically, that's Neptune in Pisces. What's the meaning that you're making of all of this? Because we get to choose that. We get to choose whether the astrology is telling us everything is going to be horrendous going forwards, and we might as well give up now. That's a bit Neptune in Pisces with all that Pluto Uranus going on. Oh my God, AI is going to kill us all, so we might as well just give up now. Or we can choose to tell ourselves a different story. Remembering at this point, Mercury is still in Scorpio. And therefore, the power is in what we tell ourselves, what we think. The mind is powerful. So Neptune goes back into Pisces, hangs around on that 29 degrees. Oh, by the way, there could be things to do with the church and belief systems sort of generally, because Pisces can be associated with faith like Sagittarius, but kind of the meaning that we place on things can be connected with different religious systems as well. Moving forward, the sun then goes into Scorpio on the 23rd of October. So now this really illuminates where the onus is on us to change. Sometimes instead of trying to change the world, the better response is to change ourselves. It also is illuminating our fears. It's illuminating our shadows. And it's also time to acknowledge those shadows and kind of welcome them back into the fold, because we tend to sort of, push away those shadowy aspects of ourselves, our fears and the things that we don't like about ourselves. But this is a time to sort of integrate all of that. Again, that's where the power lies. 23rd of October is also the date when Jupiter creates that first square to Chiron. So we get some kind of story here. There's some sort of big painful situation, or we have a big opportunity for healing. In fact, it's not or, it's both. Something is painful, Chiron, and it's affecting our confidence, it's affecting our energy levels, it's affecting our drive, our will, it's affecting how independent we can be or how independent we feel. And then Jupiter is squaring this, so it's kind of magnifying all of this. We have to be careful that we don't go over the top and sort of go, oh my God, everything is broken and I can't possibly fix it. That's kind of the really negative way of Jupiter square to Chiron, especially with that Pluto. Oh my God, it's all completely broken. And that's it. I've totally lost control. I'm giving up now, Neptune in Pisces. So let's not do that. Let's not do that one. Jupiter square to Chiron. We now have a greater potential for greater understanding of the emotional roots of our pain. And therefore, we can, if we change what we believe, Jupiter's a sky god, so he's the biggest of all the gods. If we change what we believe and we zoom up to the bigger picture, then maybe that's when we can see how to heal. And then on the 28th of October, Mars forms a trine to Jupiter. So now we get an energy release. And don't forget, it's part of that grand trine as well with Saturn. So we get an energy release. Maybe we're starting to feel brave now with Mars trine Jupiter, and we can take some kind of big action towards our transformation, towards sort of wrestling back control. Mercury then goes into Sagittarius, 29th of October. So now we're starting to, again, think in bigger ways. This opens the mind. It also encourages us to keep learning, to keep looking forward, to give our mind some kind of fresh, interesting material to challenge us. Mercury sometimes is a little bit scattered in Sagittarius because, yes, it's not the sign that it can feel the most comfortable in. It's far from home, opposite to Gemini. But it can be a really interesting transit if we open up our mind to all the different philosophies and ways of thinking about things. On the 29th of October, that grand trine is still singing really loudly because Mars will then form a trine to Saturn. So Mars trine Saturn is like a stabilizer. It's a stabilizing element for that flow of energy that's coming through. So now we're starting to think about maybe the actions that we need to take based on faith that's going to help us in the long term, Saturn in Pisces, for this vision that we want to create for our lives. Then finally, I just want to mention that on the 31st of October, happy Samhain to all the witches out there. I'm so looking forward to it this year. We have Mercury going out of bounds. So a little bit of wild energy for Halloween, a little bit of wild energy for this very magical portal that occurs as we move into Samhain, as we come to the final of the harvest festivals. And we are kind of moving now into the dark half of the year. Samhain means, or it's connected to the idea of summer's end. So we're moving into this darkness whilst Mercury is moving sort of beyond the path of the sun. So that's kind of very interesting symbolically, because the sun, of course, speaks of light. And so, yeah, maybe Mercury is moving into this place that is a little shadowy if we tie it with Scorpio season as well. So yes, Mercury is still in fiery, bright, enthusiastic Sagittarius, but now it feels like we've really gone off the beaten path. So if we've got the idea of the explorer with Sagittarius, Sagittarius is a sign that's associated with the overseas and broadening our horizons. So yes, we've kind of gone off on our trip through the mountains, but now we're taking this path that nobody usually goes down. And that's kind of the effect of Mercury out of bounds. Remember, Pluto out of bounds as well. Similar story. So we're taking the untrodden path, which of course can be either a little disconcerting and lead to some scary situations, or it can lead to the most incredible view. It can lead to something absolutely extraordinary that we would not have thought of otherwise. And that is the beauty of out of bounds planets. So Mercury will be out of bounds from the 31st of October through to the 11th of November. Tap that inspirational energy. Allow yourself to think, I want to say outside of the box. It is that kind of similar energy to Uranus sometimes. Think outside of the box. Consider, wandering off the path for a while to see what you can see. You never know what you might find. This concludes my reading for October 2025. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. It does help the algorithm. Leave a comment if you would like as well. If you would like to hear more from me, I do have a Patreon, Substack, my website, of course. There's lots and lots more articles on my website because I used to write on there for years before I started that blog back in, I think it was 2009 or something crazy like that. So there's lots of information on there. All the links are below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.